can. But I mean, maybe the only templates I would have is for instruments that I can pull in to an empty page on the production. But I would never have a full template ready. Never.
Wow. So how do you go about finding sounds if you don't have any templates? Like, do you have any like channel strips saved, or you're like
no
finding stuff?
No, I'm using my ears.
Mm-hmm.
And my imagination. Amazing. It's the ears and the imagination. It's more than any list. It's bigger than any list. I do have presets that I like on specific instruments. And for me, it's more about, like, I would say, it's about mapping every sound you ever hear. And I think that's what I kept doing for my entire life. Anything I listen to on every stage, if it's a finished record or a single track on a tracking session or an EQ plugin on a mix or a VST instrument, like a synth VST, I kind of try to remember what it feels more than what it sounds like, what it feels like and what does it do. And I can't really explain it in words, but I know that when I want to get a sound, I have this draw in my brain. I know that guy can do it, That's the kind of thing. But I think if you're opening too many presets, you're stuck with the presets and not with your real creativity mind, so it's also very dangerous.
Well, from what I understand, you work pretty fast. How do you work so fast? What's your secret? Honestly,
it's not like I always worked very fast. It's true that these days I can work very fast. I had tracks that maybe we started at 10 a.m. and by 2 p.m. it was kind of everything was there. But it wasn't always like this. And actually, it's cool. It's exactly what we talked about. I think that there was a point in time for me that I felt like I've listened to so many instruments, so many sounds, so many plugins, so many pieces of gear, so many situations in the studio, so many miking positions, so many different mics, so many different techniques that it's kind of... For me, I got to this point, I felt like I'm playing a different game. Like I know all the options and I just got to choose. And if I choose fast and work with my intuition, I can kind of get something going really quickly. But I really think there's only one way to get there, and it's experience, and I could kind of get frustrated in front of a song for a week and never get it done. And today, sometimes I could get it done in 3 or 4 hours. So... I think it's really about experience and about knowledge. You need to learn like any other craft in the world. Like if you would ask a carpenter how does he build his chair so fast, he would tell you because I did it 100 times.
Yeah, for sure. The 10,000 hour rule and all that stuff.
Yeah, and when it comes to sound and productions, there are so many different elements to it, and there are so many things to know. And it's hard, but for me, I'll tell you one thing which I think is like a really important tip to any beginning producer or engineer or musician. I think what you need to learn is your own set of rules. Meaning, if I now tell you what does 400K on a bass drum sounds like, it's a kind of an empty question. But if I tell you, do you remember what it sounded like and what did it make you feel when you opened the Kramer Pi EQ and added 400 on that kick? Do you remember how it felt like? That's a much more precise question in a way. So and then it's the way you remember it. It's not the way anybody else remembers it. And I think that's the most important thing. For me, that's what I kind of did on a natural way for me. But I think a lot of people are having a lot of trouble with that because they're trying to understand it with their brain, and not with their feelings. And it should be understood by feelings. And then it's not something you can talk about, but it's something you know. And I mean, it's maybe hard to explain exactly, but that's what it is for me.
No, I love that. That's great. So what are some of your favorite creative tools?
Wow, good question. I think in general, Ableton is an amazing creative tool. And I use it because I use mainly Pro Tools at the studio for many years. But I use Ableton as like my creative extension because I love all the little samplers and it's really flexible. You can kind of like do anything you want in a matter of seconds, So... For me, it's on the digital world. For me, that's the one great creative tool. But on the more technical, I don't know. I think I'm a big believer of playing around when it comes to that. Like, so if you have a new instrument, you will always be very open-hearted to it. So you can look for things and find things that excite you. So I would try to get something new around all the time. So it's not like there's one thing. It's more like keep renewing that and trying out as many new things as you can all the time, you know. And then even if it ends up not being used, then you should use it to save that emotional stamp in your mind to remember it for the next time you'd want it, you know.
Totally. That's great.
And I'll tell you one more thing I can say. I like unprofessional things. So like a small cracked guitar that costs $100, sometimes it could bring more inspiration than a $5,000 Les Paul, whatever, you know? So it's that. And it could be really so many things. It's hard to answer, but it's again, more than anything, it's the state of mind of being open, you know?
Yeah. I love that. So we're both bass players. Could you talk a little bit about your approach to getting the right bass tone in the studio?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think it has, honestly, with bass, my main belief, it's really mostly in the right hand finger or fingers or the way you play the right hand. It can change so much, you know, because when you listen to James Jamerson, it's not like, are you even interested in what kind of guitar he used? It's like, how the hell does he move those fingers like that, right? And it was even his toe and not his fingers. So I don't know exactly how to answer this, but it's, of course, you have to choose the right guitar for the job, you know. So if you want a McCartney style sound, of course, it's better to do it with a quarter, how do you call it?
Semi-hollow body.
Semi-hollow body guitar. And if you want this big, fat, low end, you definitely want a bigger Fender Precision or Music Man or whatever. But I think it's just like any other performance. It's mainly the approach of the musician playing, you know, if he's on the right frequency in his mind or at the time that he's playing, if you're connected to the right approach. And honestly, a lot of my bass takes are first takes, like my most initial take.
Yeah, your reaction to the music.
Yeah, and I can say on the technical level, it's the only instrument that I like to use really, really high level of monitors when I record bass.
Yeah, because it's hard to feel the bass unless it's raised up real loud.
Yeah, so I like recording really loud. I normally say to the artist, please move to the back. And I kind of... Because I'm talking serious level. I mean, like 100 dB kind of situation.
That's a good tip. Actually, I've noticed particularly your use of that McCartney kind of sound, that violin bass tone in your production sounds amazing. I heard that in a Gadi Ronen song, and also in that Rodin's track "Say." I just love what you did with that kind of violin based tone. So, how did you go about doing that?
Again, honestly, I had this idea in mind that it should be bass sounding between Motown to Paul McCartney, picky bass kind of thing. And I used the pick and I used the Vox semi-hollow body, as you say. I blasted the speakers and I played. That's all I know, you know, to be honest.
Wow. Most of the sound is just coming from the bass and your fingers.
Yeah, it's recorded direct right into my Neve preamp DI box, you know, like nothing to it.
Awesome. That's how you do it.
Yeah, and I mean, on a technical level, on a more engineering tip, I can say, because people sometimes try to record an amp and a DI and so on, and with bass, you really got to keep it simple. I mean, in general, you got to keep it simple, but when it comes to bass, sometimes just the little phasing issues between the amp and the DI could be so problematic, so you kind of need to choose. I mean, then I would prefer recording just the amp, but then you have to get the tone 100% right on that amp before you start recording. And for me, honestly, I think 90% of my bass recording, I just did DI.
Yeah, awesome, dude. So most of us tend to fluctuate between high and low levels of creativity. Do you do anything specific when you need to get inspired?
Take a break. No, seriously. Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing, first of all, you kind of have to get used to the fact that that's how it is. Creativity is a bit of a wavy line. You know, it's never steady in one position. And I think most people get upset because they don't accept that behavior. They think they should be on top all the time. And then when they're not on top and when inspiration is lacking, they would kind of hit their head against the wall and keep trying to do it again and again and again. And normally it would lead you anywhere. That's the truth, you know? So for me, sometimes if I just don't feel it on a very, like, how should I say, at the spot, kind of more or less, or in at the same hour, I would just say, let's move to a different song. Let's go take a break. Let's go have lunch and come back and see what happens. And some days are not as good as the others. It's fine. It's just the way it is, I guess.
Yeah. Just got to get used to it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think when you get used to it and stop being too upset about it, you also suffer less from it in general. And but it's a hard thing. I mean, I can say maybe the hardest thing of being a full-time producer is that you're expected to be on that high level of inspiration all the time, which is not something that's really realistic for anybody,
Yeah. But I guess you do the best you can.
Yeah.
Do you have any go-to session musicians when you need?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of the same. For me, when I listen to a musician or a player, I also stamp his playing in my mind. And then when I need something, I can say, okay, this song, you need this guy to play on because it's going to sound the best and it's going to be easy to get it there, But again, it would differ, if I'm working with an artist and it's just the two of us and we definitely need some studio musician for the production, it's very, very important to choose. But if it's like a really good band, you would never bring in anybody from the outside anyway, so it's a different process there, In general, I think working with bands and working with single artists is very different, although we kind of live in an age where there are no more bands anymore. Not really, I mean, very few.
Yeah, I know I'm almost entirely working with singer-songwriters these days.
Yeah, same here. And for me, when I meet a band, it's normally not a real band. It's a band of musicians that are accompanying a frontman artist that's like a single artist, and it's easier to call him a band, but they're not really working as a band. The band is an entity that really creates together and that every member has a very, very important meaning and part of the sound and the whole thing, So that's really the only way that a real band is meaningful,
Yeah, totally. So who mixes and masters the music you create?
That would change because sometimes it's me. I normally won't master my own productions because I think that's a little bit too much, but it also happens sometimes. But again, I think it's the same idea. I have my go-to people that I know what their signature sound is or what their abilities are. And when I understand what the project needs, I would try to go to that person if I feel that's what we need,
Totally. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you think would be helpful to somebody getting started in music production today?
Wow. It's a big question today, and I think, honestly, I don't think I'm even qualified to answer this because it's so much different than when I started out. Because, everything is so much more accessible on one end, and then on the other hand, there are so many little producers out there that are doing production, and also the actual meaning of what is music production. I think it kind of changed a little bit in the past few years. But for me, it's everything we talked about, is being connected to your own methods of sound stamping and trying to find your thing there, I mean, unless you're asking on a more practical, financial, logistical aspect. Yeah, so on the financial aspect, I don't know. It's really different. And for me, it was always a struggle to keep ends meet, I mean, it's never an easy thing making money out of music for anybody, I think, even if you're very famous. But it's like, I don't know, I guess it's something... It's for the crazy people, that people that can't do anything else. You just keep doing it until something happens. I didn't know when or how my success is going to come. I still don't know, I think when you're starting out, it's important also to initiate a lot of projects. Like, let's say you hear somebody you like, you should go ahead and contact him and tell him, I want to work with you. Let's do a song together, Because I did it a few times in my past, for sure. I still do it if I find something like that. So that's very, very important. And on the other hand, be prepared to give some time to just learn and try and do projects that, even if it's not exactly up your alley, if you can learn anything from it, you should do it when you start out,
Yeah, that's great advice. So, Ori, thank you so much. How can our audience find out a bit more about you?
Well, they can come down and meet me. No, I'm kidding. That's a good question. I have a website which is actually really not updated for a long time. But honestly, I'm available on my Facebook page, and I would love to answer any questions. I'm always open for meeting new people and talking, so you're very welcome.
Amazing. So if it's okay with you, I'll drop a link to your Facebook page in the show notes so
Cool.
people could find you. Yeah, Ori, this has been amazing talking with you. Thank you